at the beginning, particularly thank staff and our consulting team for all the hard work that they've done. I've been getting, emails at 11 at night, 3 in the morning, and with them and working with our various advocacy groups. So it's been a lot of work. I was going to propose we skip with the Pledge of Allegiance since we just did that. Is there any public comment for this meeting? Recognizing we'll take the items on the agenda as they come up. Okay. Thank you. Right. All right. Seeing none, then, we have the minutes of our special meeting of May 4th in front of us. Motion and a second by Commissioner Pierce and Commissioner Hudson. Any other comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. So the next item is recommendation to approve the final language for the proposed TEP. I'm going to ask Mr. Chittenden to come up and ask the members of the authority to turn to the first page of your handout. And in summary, what this does is it identifies some of the 5 categories of substantive changes. Oh. And he took that one. Do we have another one? It identifies.
Don't you have one?
Well, I think
no, I was looking for Kevin.
It identifies 5 categories of substantive changes, and I think these require some handouts. We'll discuss those and then we'll present them, and then we'll take public comment. And then the others are probably things that we essentially agreed to at the prior meeting and have been included in the written version. And we'll see whether people have comments on those. So, Mr. Chittenden, welcome. Welcome back from Washington.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a positive trip, as Randy described. Rush Chittenden, Deputy Executive Director, here with the authority. And item 1 is a culmination of the efforts of the past year of this board, working with the public and our stakeholders. So we're looking forward to a pretty momentous occasion here if we find a way to approve what's before us here today. I think Chair Tatson covered quite a bit of how to orient yourself with the material. I'll cover that again. The packet itself has a TEP with not a lot compared to what we've been doing in the past, but a number of strike-throughs and edits, and mostly these are decisions that we made last week. We wanted to bring it back to you to show you those edits. And then in particular, and there are some other edits in here for clarity and readability, and I'm sure that will continue as we get into the reformat of the TEP, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But I really do want to focus on 3 primary areas that were left open from last week, and those are the materials that are in your handout. And there is, I guess, a very minor one, Category 4. We'll talk about some revised language there. But I'd like to just introduce these individually. I'll cover the first one, Bart, and then Bill's going to cover some of the other items related to the GMP ULL, and we'll probably tag team a little bit on the implementing guidelines. So if you turn to the 3rd sheet in your handout, this is revised language for Category 3, BART capacity, access, and parking improvements. The 3rd sheet, it shows changes from our prior version with, or shows our prior version with changes and strikeout and replace, and then sheet 4 shows the clean version of that. Paragraph 1 is primarily just some rewording for clarity and to emphasize the intent of the use of these funds for additional cars. Paragraph 2 defines the eligibility for the funds, the additional funds beyond the cars for the BART station access, parking improvements, or alternative public transit. Talks and then describes what a process where we would use, well, and it also contains the conditions, and we've covered that a number of times. And then it also describes the process in the case that the unfortunate situation, as we called it, that the regional solution for buying the additional cars for BART does not occur. And the main items I want to point out from in here that are changed from last week is that we've noted that the authority, in consultation with the RTPCs and BART, will jointly identify the alternate uses of the funds if that should occur. And then the last paragraph is really related to maintenance of effort. And what that does in here is it refers to a specific resolution that was passed by the BART board in 2013, which really sets up their process for an inflation-based fare increase. And in it, they do express a very specific commitment to use a certain portion of those funds for capital purposes. The paragraph also does allow for economic uncertainty in the event that BART was unable to maintain that level of funding, and then we would need to work with BART to make sure that they've maintained a proportionate share of that funding, or that they've made a best effort to continue with those efforts. So, Chair, I don't know if we want to talk about these individually, or if you'd like us to cover each one, or cover all of them, and then come back.
With the pleasure of this committee authority, I'd suggest we cover the 5, take public comment on any of those, then come back and discuss.
Okay. So the next item, East Contra Costa Transit Extension. This was just some clarity to talk about the funds that are intended for access and to extend the high-capacity transit out to Brentwood. More of an editorial comment. And then I'm going to turn it over to Bill for a couple of the last few items in here. Bill's been our point person on this for quite a period of time. He's been working with a full spectrum of folks to try to find something that works for everyone. So I want to turn it over to Bill and then thank him as I do that. He's done a great job for us over the last couple of months pulling this together.
Thank you, Ross. Point out, first of all, on the third item now on this checklist on page, I'm not sure. Anyway, it's the allocation of funds on page 1.1-20 and 21. I would characterize these as all non-substantive changes. They're clarifications of the allocation process, allocation of funds, and you can see the red line strikeout, but it's really just, there's some typos, or not typos, but small caps instead of large caps, some definition of what maps are and things like that. So this came from a couple of our local jurisdictions in terms of just clarification language, and I would just, I can answer questions, but I would recommend that you consider that. That's just straightforward stuff. The more substantive change is a result of a lot of discussions with a lot of folks, and this is on the revisions to the ULL language as it relates, in this case, to minor adjustments to the urban limit line. And it's on, these, I guess these pages aren't numbered, but it's bottom right, yeah. Handout 1-11 in the lower right-hand corner. And this all relates to minor adjustments to the urban limit line, so I can frame that issue. We've had lots of discussions with a variety of stakeholders on this issue, and at the last meeting you'll recall there's quite a bit of discussion about the definition of public benefit, and quite honestly we've gone around and around with groups on that, and advice I got from a couple of key stakeholders is that we need to be clear in what we're trying to accomplish and what we're not trying to accomplish. And I would tell you up front that some of these words in here are not going to be necessarily accepted by a lot of by everybody, but I think it's pretty clear. Your board has said numerous times, and we've talked about how committed you are basically to the urban limit line process. You wanted some flexibility. All the stakeholders talk about that. So what this middle of this language related to public benefit, and I'll just kind of read it because it's important. Adoption, we would suggest that your authority required jurisdictions that are seeking to amend the urban limit line without voter approval, and that's the context. You know, there's a requirement that it not one of the 7 county findings be included in that, but this is a new finding, and that would require that it have public benefit, and said public benefit could include but not necessarily limited to enhanced mobility of people or goods, environmental protections or enhancements, improved air quality or land use, enhanced public safety or security, housing or jobs, infrastructure preservation, or other significant positive community effects as defined by the local land use authority. Now that's the definition. The next sentence is the one that, in effect, proposes to put some permanent protections in place in response to anybody that would want to do this, because the real issue here is, you know, there needs to be appropriate mitigation, and so what the suggestion is, if the proposed minor adjustment to the ULL is proposed to accommodate housing or commercial development, said proposal must include permanent environmental protections or enhancements, such as permanent protection of agricultural lands, the dedication of open space, or the establishment of permanent conservation easements. This is intended to harden the line, to basically say, you know, there needs to be an overwhelming public benefit if you're going to, in effect, you know, break a hole, if you will, in the urban limit line that the voters did approve. So I think this sets a pretty high standard, and this is a standard that we've talked to a lot of folks about. It doesn't say no, but it says, you know, there's a high standard for that. Now, with that, the other change to this, and this is fairly substantive as well, the last bulleted point down there, that any jurisdiction proposing, it talks about having an ag protection ordinance in place. We believe that if you require these permanent environmental protections and establishment of ag preserves, et cetera, you don't need that second one, because that satisfies that question. Now, again, this is only to minor adjustments non-voter approved. Voter approved, you know, it's basically, it's up to the voters to decide what they like or don't like. So this has been kind of the heart of a lot of the discussions in the last few weeks, and it's our best shot, if you will, of trying to propose something that we think makes some sense. And then I guess the last one in this, you want to do these first 5? I can cover this one. Implementing guidelines on the performance-based project review. Again, I think this is non-substantive in a sense. It's basically saying what you do as an authority, that for those projects that basically that reduce greenhouse gases or reduce per capita. Oh, it's been corrected. Per capita vehicle miles traveled. They corrected that. I kept noticing that, and I forgot to check it. In other words, you'll prioritize and reward these high-performing projects by working with the sponsor to leverage additional regional or other funding sources. That's what you do. These projects that rank high are going to qualify well for that anyway. So it's a statement, and it's intended to provide an incentive for sponsors to look for the higher-performing projects in that context. So.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all. I'm done.
Okay. Bill's been running so much, I'm sure he's out of breath after that. But, Chair, if you don't mind, before we start discussion there, if we go back to this second, third page, handout, page 1-1, 1-2, real quick, I've tried to summarize the changes that are included in the packet. Most of them are per decisions that we made last week, so I've tried to note that in the bullets. A couple that we were directed to go out and find language and bring it back. Category 11, that was to recombine the categories and follow the direction on the language from last week. The one that we clarified, it's under Adopt Growth Management Program, Goals and Objectives. We had a bullet in the ULL talking about changes that were being proposed, applying as well to Measure J, so we wanted to put it in the TEP, and we'll talk about that on our next agenda item in adopting an ordinance. Another advanced mitigation program, we had some discussion at last meeting, so provided some language that we think clarifies our intent and adds something that was missing about the intent that mitigation would occur near the vicinity of the project impact. And then for the governing structure, we wanted to, this kind of ties to the last thing that Bill talked about, performance-based review. We already have our existing Citizens Oversight Committee reviews the growth management program. We're proposing that the Public Oversight Committee does that. We think it makes sense. That's kind of on the program side. On the project side, have them review our application of the performance-based review policy. We are at the point now where we are recommending that we do have members from 2 different labor councils, and I think everything else is pretty straightforward from the direction that we received last week. So stand ready to answer any questions and participate in the discussion. Thank you.
Right, let me take public comment first. I'm going to ask each of you to limit your comments to 3 minutes. Our first speaker will be Debbie Toth, followed by Dave Campbell and Lisa Vorderbruggen. Welcome.
Last in, first out. Come on. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Debbie Toth from Rehabilitation Services of Northern California. Unlike Commissioner Durant, I just have allergies. I don't come here sick, but I did want to say I'm extremely grateful for the process. It's been very inclusionary and considerate, and I will say from an environmental perspective, I would like to see some stronger work done around the urban limit line and ensuring that our modes of transportation are forward-thinking for our future. I also want to just say I'm incredibly grateful for the support that we've had in the arena of accessible transportation for everyone. I think that I'd like to see more money in it, but I think everybody in this room would like to see more money in their categories. I think that it's important that regardless of what happens with this TEP, that we've moved forward with the policy around accessible transportation and recognizing that this is a huge segment of our population that we need to address appropriately. And just thank you all for your hard work. Good night.
Thank you, and good luck with your allergies.
Thank
All
you.
right. So following Dave Campbell and Lisa Vorderbruggen, our next speaker will be Joel DeValcourt. And if anyone else wishes to speak on this item, please fill out one of the white speaker cards and hand it to Ms. Grover. Welcome.
Thank you. Dave Campbell, Advocacy Director with Bike East Bay, here to say that we are in support of the proposed plan, including all of the last-minute changes that have been presented to you. They all sound great. So I'm ready to recommend Bike East Bay's support of this plan to my board and make it official in the next month. I do want to thank you for your support for better bicycling. We would like 5% for bike ped if there's an extra 1% laying around or if the math was wrong. I'll take it. And for listening to me go on and on and on about complete streets and why it's so important. But thank you for your support of that as well. And then, of course, thanks to the staff for all their hard work. And I hope we can get everybody on board because we're going to need to do that to pass this in November. So thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you. Lisa Vorderbruggen, followed by Joel DeValcourt and Ron Brown.
Good evening. Lisa Vorderbruggen, representing the Building Industry Association of the Bay Area. I've been telling folks who've asked me what life is like in terms of being different, being a reporter covering these meetings when I covered Measure J the last go around, and what it's like to be negotiating some of the contents. I have described it this way. Previously, I observed the sausage being made. Now I'm in the grinder. So with that little bit of humor, and I do mean little bit of humor, the Building Industry Association is pleased to say that we will support this measure with the changes that have been recommended by your staff, and we will enthusiastically do so, provided you adopt all that good stuff. Thank you.
That was a very fast 3 minutes. Thank you. Yes. Joel DeValcourt, Ron Brown, and Joel Ramos. And that's my last speaker slip. So again, if anyone else would like to speak, this is a great time to fill out a speaker card. Welcome. And hopefully you're
Hi.
feeling better as well.
I'm drinking tea.
At least you're vertical.
Yeah, no margaritas this week yet. I want to thank you all first for your leadership and hard work on working on public policy in Contra Costa. It's tough. We all know it's tough. And I have recommendations to give you tonight that are not unique, but perhaps just stronger language than what you might expect. What you have before you tonight, and what I actually just saw in the last 5 minutes, is wholly inadequate on the public benefits piece. It's permissive of sprawl development outside of the voter-approved urban limit lines. As it currently stands, it essentially raises a good deal above the voters of Contra Costa. And actually, Greenbelt Alliance, for the record, stood squarely against the insertion of the language as it stands today. Since the beginning of this process, we've been calling for the elimination of the 30-acre loophole. Allowing the 30-acre adjustments without a vote of the people is far less than we've been calling for. So the public benefits piece is what we thought would be the middle ground, and we think that's very reasonable. The urban limit line can be changed at any time with a vote of the people, and we've been asking for this for the entire time and putting in our good sense, and I think good wishes as well. All urban limit line expansions that are done for private, commercial, or residential development should go to a public vote of the people based on their merits, and this has been done in other counties. It's been done in Napa County quite successfully for the last 16 years, and we believe that it gives the voters the opportunity to weigh on very important, critical land use issues that reflect on transportation, congestion, and the quality of life in Contra Costa. Finally, there can be no equivocating that sprawl development project currently as in development called Tazahar Parks is now public, and it would be rushing to fulfill the current policy before the election in 2016. The Tazahar Parks sprawl project is now public, having the draft environmental impact report released this week, and it would be the first sprawl development outside the urban limit line that would be allowed without a vote of the people. And this is exactly the type of concern we've had, and I would have a really hard time believing that we can continue to have the same policies in place and expect the voters of Contra Costa to allow that to happen. We're also disappointed that the infill incentives were cut in half. It was supposed to be a way in which to balance the growth management program with the ability to continue to provide new homes and jobs near transit, and we thought that you had all supported that. And we'd also had hoped the business community would be in support of that. Instead, they came out very strongly in opposition to everything that we proposed for growth management, and that was a big disappointment. And I don't know, for those that don't know the big news, that Governor Brown has essentially put forward the most sweeping piece of public policy on housing in California, and I would hope that we could redirect perhaps some of that building energy towards supporting that rather than killing off opportunities to support voters in their protection of farms and ranches. So also just want to support our colleagues on transit funding for buses at 15%, bike ped at 5%, and that's all I got for you tonight.
Okay, thank you. Ron Brown, followed by Joel Ramos and Kristen Connolly. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. There was one important Thank you. There was one important announcement that I don't think was made tonight. Some of us in the audience and maybe even at the dais would appreciate it if no basketball scores were mentioned.
All right.
Let us be happy or sad when we get home late tonight. I'm Ron Brown, representing Save Mount Diablo. And Save Mount Diablo will continue to remain engaged in this process. We appreciate all the work going into this matter, and we continue to hope to see improvements in the key areas that we've previously articulated, such as the following: the need for a transformative, fiscally constrained plan, which would set clear priorities and help achieve pollution and climate change goals. Enhanced growth management policies that would tighten urban limit lines. For example, if 30-acre adjustments are to be made to the urban limit line in some cases, we've asked that those adjustments be allowed only for legitimate public purposes, but not for additional private residential or commercial development. As a companion to existing urban limit lines, we asked that there be a requirement for transportation and development projects that destroy agricultural and rangelands to balance those impacts with reasonable mitigations and protections, such as reasonable mitigation ratios for impacted agricultural lands. We've asked for and continue to request quantitative performance measures against which projects, programs, and policies would be measured and funded, and that the measure prohibits sprawl-inducing transportation projects. In the program categories, we also have requested a reasonable 6% for advanced mitigation projects, the same level as similar transportation plans in San Diego. And we request a modest 5% for bike ped and regional trail improvements, which will help divert traffic from roads. Alameda and San Francisco counties fund these transportation categories at much higher levels. Further, like other organizations, Save Mount Diablo will not take a final position on this measure until we see a final product. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Ramos, followed by Kristen Connolly, and now Ms. Connolly's speaker slip is the last one I have. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for all your hard work, and my thanks to the consultants and to the TA for all the great time and investment, the staff that went into this. My name is Joel Ramos. I'm with Transform. I was one of the members of the EPAG. From the very beginning, we were certainly hoping that this body would recognize the value of transportation operations, namely trying to get the corridors of the county headways of 15 minutes, more or less, during the peak hours at least. And maybe this does that. Maybe you guys know something that we don't, we couldn't figure out. But as a kid, growing up in Contra Costa County, like I said earlier, I went to Mount Diablo High School. I lived in Bay Point, and I felt like I spent half my childhood on buses or waiting for them because they were so slow and they would come so infrequently. Thank you, Director Peoples. I worked at Sun Valley Mall washing dishes while most of you were probably playing football or doing other great after-school activities, and it prevented me from getting into college right away because I didn't get the grades that I needed. And ultimately, it's had a hindrance on my family's well-being. I still haven't been able to afford a house, despite me having served in the Marine Corps and getting the GI Bill to get through San Francisco State University. My point is that you can't get ahead if you can't get around. And this measure does not yet, at least from my perspective, demonstrate that you're going to get the people that need to get ahead around. I hope that I'm wrong. And at this point, while we're supportive of all the good things that are in this measure, who can be against innovation? Who can be against fixing potholes and all the great things that you guys are pushing in this, which is all wonderful. But we feel like ultimately there wasn't enough voice for the folks that are stuck on the bus and that will continue to be stuck on the bus or waiting for a bus for years to come. So I hope that going forward that we can be supportive in the future, that you folks can demonstrate to us what we're not seeing and show us how folks on the bus are actually going to be able to see benefits from this because, my niece, my brother's daughter, is still in my shoes where I was. She's car dependent, and I don't see how this is going to change her life at all. So I'm hoping that I'm not seeing something, and I'm hoping that you guys can show us and the rest of the public how to get to those 15-minute headways and get better connectivity to the folks that aren't the most app savvy or technology savvy or what have you, and don't own a car, can't operate a car. I'm hoping that in all your wisdom and experience, that you're going to be able to show us that so that we can help you get the 2/3 that you're going to need to win this. But we'll be waiting. But thank you again, all of you. I know your hearts are in it, and I continue to press on with such confidence. But I certainly hope that we'll be more creative in addressing these issues that I still feel have not yet been resolved. Thank you all so much.
Okay. Thank you. Kristen Connolly, and if anyone else would like to speak, please complete a speaker slip. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Kristen Connolly. I'm president and CEO of the East Bay Leadership Council, proud Contra Costa native. I do want to, echo the appreciation that's been expressed to you in terms of all of the time, effort, and energy that you and the consultant team have put into the development of this process. Like Debbie Toth said, this has been a very inclusive process that has been extraordinarily time-consuming. I would respectfully disagree with my friend Joel in terms of the characterization of the business community in terms of what we have done in the development of this measure. I think that there have been a lot of improvements since the first draft of this was put together, and we are serious about our commitment to growth management and also very serious about the goal of this measure, which is to improve transportation, to improve mobility, the movement of people and goods in Contra Costa County, which, respectfully, is different than San Francisco and different than some of these other counties that have been cited. But I do think that there are significant improvements that will be made through this measure across modes. I think investments in innovation make a lot of sense, and I think it's important to reserve flexibility for responding to the challenges that we will face over the next 30 years. And I would encourage you to move forward here. Again, the East Bay Leadership Council will officially consider endorsement at a later time when the plan is finalized. But there's a lot in this measure, including increased investments in the major corridors, that is consistent with the transportation vision that we've developed through our transportation task force and that I've expressed to you over these many, many months. So I just wanted to thank you for your continued engagement and encourage you to move forward.
Great. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, let me bring it back to the authority members, and I would suggest we begin with the first 5 items that staff outlined. And I'd like to start the BART item with 2 questions. One to Commissioner Keller. Is this proposal acceptable to BART?
It is.
And one to Commissioner Durant, who gave us some very good ideas about some of the MOE language. Is this proposal acceptable to you?
It is. Thank you.
Okay. Other commissioner comments?
Looks good.
I think it's a great job and want to thank Joel and David for coming up with this. I think it's a great solution.
And I would like to add to that BART staff and Director Murray, and so thank you all. Well, okay, let's move on to the next one, which is Category 4, the wording in the East Contra Costa Transit Extension. Commissioner Romick and Commissioner Taylor.
No, this is fine.
Okay.
This is good.
Commissioner Taylor?
I'm happy.
All right. Other commissioner comments? Seeing none, I assume we'll move on. The allocation of funds language, which is 1.1-20 or 1-8 in the handout numbering. Any commissioner comments? Commissioner Arnerich.
Yeah, I think this is good, except there's a sentence in it that doesn't, it's just not grammatically correct. And it's the underlined one where it says, for the purposes of the required wildlife corridor policies and ordinance. This is a section where we talked about policies. Shouldn't it say the wildlife corridor and creek development policies should be based on implementing the East Contra Costa HCNCCP? I mean, that's really what it's trying to say. What it doesn't say that. It talks, is that the purpose of it? Who wrote this?
Yeah, our office was involved in this. I think you're right. I'm looking at the language, and I think a
Maybe we could just rewrite it to accomplish what's...
we can.
We want to use that as the measure. So the policies that are required to be put in place should be based on or should look to that for their...
No. The intent here is that if you have adopted an ordinance which implements the East County HCP, that satisfies the requirement to have an adopted
Then say that.
I know. I agree.
Otherwise,
I concur that
otherwise, the rest of it I think is fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, just like you said.
Yes.
You got the 4 and all that. That's short
Okay.
and specific and made it.
Sure. Any other comments on this item? All right. Moving on to the revision to the ULL language, about which we received a fair amount of the public comment this evening, and I appreciate their coming forward. I know that this has been an interest, particularly to our representatives from the county, and so I don't know if Commissioner Mitchoff or Commissioner Glover have comments.
No comments.
No comments? Anyone else? Commissioner Arnerich?
I just want to, I get the discussion around this, and I just want to remind, as one of those who helped sell for Measure J in the South County as the chair of bringing cities together when we weren't together to get people to either support the county urban limit line or do your own. And San Ramon in our area is the only one that did that. This was not only for Measure J, but the original ordinance, it was passed by the people. So I know we have these concerns. We want to make sure that people get to vote on it. I wasn't concerned about this until obviously a project that's brewing beyond our borders. It concerns us, but it's got a lot of tests. I mean, this will test the envelope. This is the first real direct housing outside the urban limit line project that's been put forward. So that determination rests with 4 votes, and I trust they'll do the right job. What I'm concerned about is we're really making this so complicated. I'll be honest, I read it. I'm in this business. I don't understand sometimes what this is trying to say, and I got the public benefit kind of language. I think I'm okay with that, but I would just hope from the environmental point of view that 99% of us have held absolutely adamantly to either our own voter approved or in our case in Danville and a lot of the other cities I represent, they've all held exactly what the county put in place. So I hope we know that's a big deal, and that was approved by voters twice. So it's not like we're making those decisions. The voters said, that's what I want to do. It was on the ballot, and they had to say an opportunity. So just when we say, well, we're trying to protect the voters, we are protecting the voters because we sold it that way. And I understand the other side, we're worried about what if. It hasn't happened, and guess what? Here's a test. So I'm looking at our county folks. It's up to you guys.
Thanks. No comments. Right. All right, Commissioner Durant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a very brief comment. I want to say thank you to all the folks who worked on the language. I tossed out there at the last meeting a definition of public benefit that I found on the internet. I don't even remember where it was from, just to get the conversation started. I think what's clear here is that this gives the public who will vote on this a very firm and clear idea about what things we are saying, and hence they, if they vote on it, are saying are things that we consider to be a public benefit. And I think that's an important point of clarity. I think it's a good, strong step, and recognizing with appreciation that it doesn't go as far as some people would like. I do believe that this is a very good and fine way to achieve our intended result, which is that we have that additional finding that there is a real and substantial public benefit achieved by making the kind of adjustment without a voter approval. And of course, finding's not necessary if the body wanting to have the expansion goes and gets voter approval. So I think that it's stronger protection than was there before and is a great move. So thank you.
Other comments? Commissioner Butt.
I see this description of what's a public benefit, including housing, and I don't really understand that, but I wasn't here when some of this was put together finally, but it's almost meaningless. I mean, if you look at the list of public benefits, it's hard to think of anything that somebody couldn't justify as a public benefit for expanding the urban limit line. I mean, I don't know what it would be. I can't think of anything that would not fall into the category of a public benefit if somebody wanted to spin it that way. But this is my comment.
Okay. Other comments? All right. I'm sensing general concurrence with the staff report, which brings us to the final item, the implementing guidelines, a change to the performance-based project review language. which is on page 1-13 of your handout. Are there any comments?
I'm sorry, I was busy talking when I should have been listening. Where are we?
It's on page 1-13 of the handout.
Yeah, I did have one. I like what you're doing here. I know I've been beating it to death from the beginning because I wanted to push for the people that are kicking in more money get a little higher priority. If I go about 75% of the way down the review, actually it's a sentence where the underlining is, when appropriate, the authority will encourage project sponsors to identify and select a project alternative that reduces greenhouse gas as well as vehicle miles traveled per capita. I mean, we're both trying to do the same thing. It's just a minor thing, but I mean, we're looking at 10 million metric tons per capita by 1990. But I mean, it's not a big thing. I could live with it either way, but it just seems simpler to me, Bill.
Okay. Sure. All right, other comments? All right, then let's move to the other substantive changes. And I wasn't going to go through this page by page. The first one is on Category 8. This was in the revision that was passed out, updating the funding for the State Route 242 and SR4 corridor to $108 million total.
This is in the packet. This is
I'm
in the
still looking
packet.
I'm going back to the summary sheet, right.
Yeah, but this is referring to the language,
In the packet, correct. It was already incorporated.
not in the handout.
Right. Okay, seeing no comments. The Vasco Road updated language, Byron Highway Corridor. Fine, okay. The next is Category 11. We combine the West County and we combine all subregions into a single funding category, and then had two paragraphs, one for West County, one for the other three subregions. Any comments? Okay. Moving on to the next page in the handout, Category 15, bike ped. After discussion, we went back to the 1/3 to East Bay Regional Park District, and a maintenance of effort language, right? Which is
Didn't we cut it to 3?
now.
And then
He hasn't slept, ignore him.
the only so the only thing that I didn't see in there was that we were going to add, and our East Bay director agreed, was that we weren't just writing a check for a third of all those funds, that they would submit a list that we would mutually agree upon. And I'm trying to, I've been reading it, and I
think that's
I read that into my
At the very
mind.
end,
I don't necessarily, do I see that?
The last sentence of the second paragraph.
It says the authority in conjunction with the development maintenance of effort.
Maintenance of effort, yeah.
No, that's there.
Yeah.
But I think we
So
needed to add that one
So
sentence.
the second sentence says, East Bay Regional Park District is to spend its allocation proportionally in each subregion, subject to the review and approval of the conceptual planning/design phase
We're
by the
identifying
applicable
projects.
subregional committee prior to funding allocations by the authority.
Okay. I guess that. I was reading it differently, but okay, that sounds better.
Yeah.
All right?
Sometimes it helps to hear it.
All right, moving on to the growth management program on goals and objectives. Just a bullet that states that the GMP in this upcoming measure would replace the GMP in Measure J, assuming that this measure is adopted.
Yes.
Right.
One set of guidelines.
Right, okay.
Chair Tatson, can I
Yes.
interrupt? When it gets time to make a motion, I would ask that in that, and this is probably the most applicable sentence, that the motion includes that staff will work with our legal counsel to make sure that we have consistency, because the words that are in there right now aren't quite right. The intent is right, but when it comes back, you'll see some modification.
Okay. So I assume whoever is thinking they're going to make a motion made note of that. All right.
Can I just ask
yes.
a question? That's going to happen before it goes out to the cities. Those corrections will be made
Yes.
to make them in sync.
Yeah. They're pretty much made on my computer. Just
Okay,
didn't have
just
time to
checking.
report it.
Just
Print it.
checking on timing.
Okay. there's other things on 1.1-17 of the TEP related to compliance also required for the Community Development Transportation Program. Any comments? Okay, moving down to the urban limit line descriptions, we're deleting paragraph 3, given the other changes we've made. Advanced mitigation program, there's a number of updates to the language for clarity, and we've added the list of eligible projects. Okay, governing structure, we've added, we have both the Building and Construction Trade Council and the Central Labor Council, so this now is a 16-member committee, but as it's advisory, split votes would simply come as 2 opinions to us. And there, the item Ross talked about was additional community committee responsibility. And we added the countywide transit plan, as we talked about at the last hearing.
Right.
All right. Okay, well, fortunately or unfortunately, SWAT met on yesterday, and I do have one request I'm supposed to bring forward that I have to, because Commissioner Hudson was out having a good time in Washington, D.C., and that is if you go to the complete streets category in the draft TEP. Hang on.
It is page 1.125, right?
Well, it's page 7 of 36 or 1.1-8.
Oh, not the policy, the reference.
The reference to the project itself.
I'm talking about which document?
1-7. Yeah.
It's the major streets, secondary streets category.
It's the original packet that was in the email. Okay, so if you go about halfway down that paragraph at the top, there's a sentence that says, all projects will be selected through a competitive project selection process within each subregion, with the authority approving the final program of projects, allowing for a comprehensive countywide approach while recognizing sub-regional needs to achieve the overall program goal. SWAT's
1.1-8 is where you are. In the
Right.
paragraph,
Right.
halfway down.
Right. So SWAT's request is that, right, that same language be added to expenditure categories
I think I have it.
for pedestrian, bicycle, and trail facilities and the Community Development Transportation Program.
Right, and he also recommended 17, the innovative transportation technology.
Right. So we could either handle it by adding or just, there's an implementing guideline for regional equity. We could add it there and just refer to the 4 programs. Is that?
Which, sorry. I understand which language we're reading. Where are we talking about putting it in?
In pedestrian, bicycle, and trail facilities, community development transportation programs, and innovative transportation technologies, all of which are described as competitive. Right.
Sorry, where's the? Maybe I'm missing something. I'm sorry.
Sorry?
Your flashlight's on your phone.
Your flash.
Right.
So which paragraphs are we looking to add this language to, or are we just?
We're adding it to the descriptions of the pedestrian, bicycle, and trail facility category.
Which is which?
Ross, which number is it?
We're looking, the 3 that were recommended as SWATs was category 15, pedestrian, bicycle, and trails, so that would be for the 2/3 of that.
Yep.
Category 16, community development, transportation.
And 17.
And category 17, innovative transportation technology and connected communities.
And so we could either do it there or just do something in the regional equity of the implementing guidelines.
Competitive.
Right, yeah, obviously that, they would still get that. Right. All right, any other comments?
Conceptually, I'm okay with that. I'd like to read the language of those paragraphs to make sure it doesn't do violence to something else.
Right. Okay, are there any other comments? Seeing none, Commissioner Pierce.
Not on the document, but I would like to respond to a concern that Mr. Ramos made, because having spent the last few days in Washington, D.C., telling them about how we're going to get people into buses and how we're going to make it easier for people to get around without a car, and me saying, I think every hour, that in the next 30 years, the senior population will increase by 300%, and we don't really want all those people driving around, do we? So we have to find a way for them to take public transportation. And one of the things that we are doing with technology, which really is a good thing, is getting people out of their cars. We're providing alternative forms of transportation. And so I imagine that very soon, and including the testing that we're starting this summer, that there will be, before very long at all, a shuttle that will come pick me up at my house and take me to BART. Or it will take me to a bus stop if I can't walk there. And it will get me on a bus. And instead of having buses running around on every little side street trying to pick people up there, the big buses will run the major corridors, and we'll have a small shuttle that will ferry us back and forth from our doorstep to that bus or to the BART station. And then we can take public transit. It will also take us from the bus stop in the office park where we work, and it will take us from that bus stop in the office park right to the door of our office building. And that way we put 2-3 times as many express buses on the freeway from the BART stations to those office parks. And that's how you equalize and increase bus transit. You make it easier and simpler for people to use it. And we will make it available for everyone. One of the things we talked about in here is enhancements to ride the buses, including things like fee waivers and lowered ticket prices for school kids and free bus passes for kids that get the free lunch program, things like that. Because if kids aren't in school, they're not learning, they're not going to get that degree. So if they qualify for the free lunch program, we give them a student bus pass. So those are the kinds of things we're trying to do to be transformative here and get people into public transit. And one of the things we've talked about, and I don't think you were here for that meeting, was a discussion we had probably a month or so ago. I'm losing track. But Newell was mentioning the cost per ride for some of these forms of transportation, and that if we're going to train the younger generation to use buses, we have to make it friendly for them. That's part of where the school bus program comes in and is really a good thing. That's where student bus passes are a really good idea, because they start to learn very early to use bus transit. And they then find that there's another way to get around besides the single occupant vehicle, and they then use that when they grow up. So it's a matter of just training the new generation and making those options available. So that's how we're trying to do what you were asking for.
Thank you. Commissioner Aldridge.
I'd just like to add some comments along with what Julie's saying. First, I think we were joking probably at the last meeting, when you want to make a good cup of tea, you got to let the water boil occasionally. And it's boiled over for all of us. Behind the scenes, some people I know, Dawn, Julie, and obviously staff have put tremendous amount of hours, and all of us in different ways. But I do want to say I think there's some really good things, and it's a big lift. We're going to have to convince our voters of things that we're talking policy stuff here that is not things that they've asked us to do, not even close to what they've asked. But I think they are important, and I think it's important for us to be able to, as collectively as policymakers, and we are the elected ones, and they elect us to try to make those best judgments. We have moved from a Measure C, which started us on a path of tying transportation and development. That was the first big step. Measure J went further along that line. And in this, if you had just shown up tonight and we're looking at this language and we're here back in the late 1980s when Measure C, you go, well, how can you do all of this? While it may not be as much as we want, as an architect, I design buildings, and I love to design lots of things. And somebody says, well, you're not going to get to do that. There's a design review commission. You got to go. There's a planning commission. There's a series of people who have their interest, which are as valid as the next person's. But together, our job is to help try to balance that. And I know people want to define transformative, as Julie was mentioning, in different ways. This is a big deal. And I think to Mr. Ramos, I would say too, in Central and South County, one of the most transformative things we can do for buses, and mathematically, it is absolutely one of the most cost-effective things. We call it fare waivers. Let's be honest. If you made the buses for free, given the structure that we have now, for basically about 7 or 8% of the total cost of that bus system, that's all it takes to do that. Now, if you wanted to double the buses, it would take 100% cost. So there are bus systems that we're probably going to be putting in place that we've allowed, and we're putting more money in this area than we ever have. And I think that's exciting. That's something that we're not doing what we've done in the past. That's why we're sitting here tonight talking about trying to do something different. We made all those decisions. We didn't leave it up to anybody. We didn't leave it up to the change. We didn't leave it up to the future. We didn't leave it up to those people as advocacy groups move and swell in different ways that we can respond to that. And I think also from our environmental friends, there are a lot of things that are really, really tough for us to sell that are right here now. Could they be tougher? Certainly. But I think in give and take, we've made a big move. We're putting more money than we ever have in real dollars into bike and ped. And I think we're going to do it in a really smart way. And I agree, though, somebody's mentioned, both sitting here on the other side, the language on public benefits. I'm not sure what it really says. And I would hope that, staff takes it as we make a motion tonight to move forward, which I'm certain we're going to do, that we give a little latitude in that, to work on that a little better. Let's get our attorney. Mala has a very objective way of knowing what we're trying to do, how to do it in a way that we all understand it. Yeah, I'm not sure I understand all the words in there because I can read into it other things. And again, since I didn't write it when I read it, I only know what I know those words say, and I come out with different conclusions. So I think it would be encouraged that maybe there's some tweaking in that, and if that helps get everybody closer, I think that's an okay area to do it in. The other thing that I think is one of the most transformative thing, well, if you're a transportation junkie, you want to talk about all the technology and the stuff we're going to do, but the most transformative thing we're doing here is advanced mitigation. That's a big stretch. It's going to change how we do. It's way outside of CEQA. It has a lot of value. Our communities are not going to understand that. You're asking me to vote, put money aside to do something for what? How does it connect? We're going to have to do a lot of work to explain what that is, show how those benefits. I think if you understand it, you can grasp that. I don't think that the average person are going to see that. And the last comment I would have is in the actual document, there's a list of the key benefits. There's one thing that's missing on here, and I just want to remind everybody. So this is one that has this. It's right off of our survey that we did. It's page 140-47. And it's actually the number one item people asked for that's on our survey. And what was that? Fixing local streets and roads and potholes. That one was left off of here. That is really important, and it needs to be closer to the top because on the survey, that was number one. The BART was number two. I just think let's make sure we listen completely to them because I know in some of the communities that we live in, their number one thing, as much as we love all this wonderful policy and how we're going to make the world better, that's going to help them support this. So with that, I'd be glad to make a motion.
I think Commissioner Durant wanted to
Sure. Yeah.
Commissioner Durant.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Newell on that one. A couple of sort of overarching comments. One is, in addition to thanking the host of people who've participated in this long and somewhat arduous process, including our stakeholders, our staff, our consultants, all of you, the commissioners and other folks who've been sitting up here. And I have to say, one of the things that I deeply appreciate about this county is the way that the public officials in this county work together. to try to find good compromises and to try to get really good stuff done. And I think the document we have before us is a reflection of serious thought, care, and effort to take into account the vast array of input that we've had, and to make compromises and to stretch in places where, for some of us, I know it has occasionally been uncomfortable. And so I just want to say thank you for that. I take it as an honor to be able to be here working with this group of people on something like this. I think the process has been the most inclusive that I've ever seen, and I think that's a testament to our staff for sticking with it, to our consultants for bearing an awful lot of the brunt of it, and to all of you who've participated in it and stuck with it. Obviously there are lots of people who were involved early who fell away and have stopped participating, but to the people who stuck it out, I really appreciate it. I think it's helped us to get to a place where the document in front of us is a much better product than it ever would have been otherwise, and I think that's to your credit and to ours. Because if nothing else, there's more clarity and there are a lot of improvements. Particularly in light of a couple of comments tonight, to be sure there are compromises that we have made. And the fact that we haven't adopted everything that one group or another wants or feels that they need doesn't mean you haven't been listened to, doesn't mean you haven't been heard. It ultimately means that in the process of coming to a reasoned compromise, we felt that we've gone as far as we can to keep other stakeholders and other constituents in this with us. And so while I understand that there may not be happiness all around, there are certainly things, I'll just say it out loud, there are certainly things in here that I do not love. There are a couple of things in here that I flat out do not like. I'm not happy with a couple of the additions even tonight. And after carefully considering and balancing things, I simply decided those were reasonable compromises to make for the greater good and to get this thing moved to the point where we can move forward. So, Newell and I can thumb wrestle for who wants to make a motion. But
why don't you do that while Commissioner Mitchoff and Commissioner Butt speak?
I was going to say, but I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mitchoff.
Thank you. And I know Commissioner Arnerich wants the public benefit comments tweaked. I don't know what that means. To address Commissioner Butt, last week we did get a request from some of our partners here that they wanted to limit all commercial or residential. And the reason that some of us have said we've got to have this flexibility is because, and with all due respect to what the governor's going to do, we haven't been able to get there, and we've got to be able to put jobs and housing closer together. And Newell, you even mentioned that people will be voting on this. It's wordy, I grant you that, but it has to be wordy because we couldn't just leave it at public benefit. And I think this, as David was just mentioning, is a good compromise. I agree there are things in here that if we all had our own way would not be in here, or we'd have something in there that is not in there. But it's a good compromise, and it allows the flexibility. Again, as I mentioned last week, the county has the majority of land outside the urban limit line, and it's not that we're going to go willy-nilly and do a 30-acre and a 30-acre and a 30-acre and a 30-acre, but we have to have some flexibility depending on where it is. So I think the language on the public benefit is appropriate. There's been a lot of hard work put into this over the last week, and I don't think there needs to be any more tweaking. And that would be my comment, that it be left alone.
Thank you. Commissioner Butt.
If I were the transportation czar, my plan would not look like this, but I am not the transportation czar. I'm one of 11 commissioners. And I guess that the positive things in this for me are that, number one, I'm proud of my part of the county, I think, in coming up with our part of the plan that really is sustainable and might even be described as visionary and transformative. As a whole, I don't think we're there. But I guess I'm kind of, I've been making sausage for 20 years, Lisa, and I've got a pretty good idea about how it's made. And, sometimes you just have to close your eyes and not really look at what goes in there, because what comes out the other end, once you throw it on the barbecue and put some mustard on it, it tastes pretty good. So, but I think that I'm doing a little bit of a Hail Mary here, because I think some of the concerns of my friends from Save Mount Diablo and the Green Space Alliance, Greenbelt Alliance, I think the future is going to sort some of this stuff out, and I think we're seeing it move pretty fast already. I think that that as we move into the good thing about this is that if it passes, that it will provide a lot of money, and it will provide for a lot of good stuff. It also has a lot of things in it that in my opinion shouldn't be there. But I think some of that's going to get sorted out, because a lot of these projects are going to have to go through CEQA review. They're going to be subject to increasingly visionary state law and state statutes that really is recognizing the challenges we have with global warming and a lot of other things. I think that one of the things I brought back from going to the UN Conference on Climate Change in Paris is that everybody agreed that if this thing is going to work, it's because the cities of the world are going to make it work. And I think that as we go into the future, I think that the cities, even cities in some parts of Contra Costa County, are going to change politically, and they're going to have some different visions about where they want to be. And so I think that some of that will start to bend some of these projects as they move into the future, and you might see there's a lot of policies in here about that can provide subtle shifts in how this money is spent and what the priorities are and that kind of thing. And I hope they'll come into play, and I hope that maybe 10 years down the road, the way we're spending this money, again, if it passes, won't necessarily look like the way people thought it was going to be spent today. But I think there's flexibility in here to do it.
Okay, Commissioner Arnold.
I would, on that last note, what I just heard was something that I think was a good reminder that, and I said it a little bit in a different way, that we've left a lot of room for the future in this, a lot of room, but we put some really good bones into this. So as the city rep, I would be pleased to recommend that we approve the TEP as presented tonight just with those modifications that we agreed to through the chair, which doesn't include what I was suggesting. And I understand what you're saying. But also that we do give flexibility for staff along with our attorney to make those language changes to make sure that it's consistent in the vocabulary.
Can we make that, just to be sort of clarifying, that the changes to be made between staff and legal are non-substantive corrections and refinements, just so that we have a complete record of that? So they're
Yes.
editorial.
Yes.
Great, and I would second that.
I think, Ross, you want to add?
I think one of the other suggestions was the language about sub-regional competitive, that's categories 15, 16,
Right.
and 17,
We
are
included
competitive within sub-region.
Yes, so all those that we agreed to by consensus through the chair.
Yeah, and I think on that one, sorry, on that one, the only thing I would indicate is there's one of them, I think it's number 16. You can't really move the exact language because it doesn't fit with the sentence structure, but I would throw that into the editorial thing. Conceptually, it's great.
Thank you.
Okay, so discussion of the motion, Commissioner Hudson.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on something Tom said, because I think I know where he was going with it. This is built flexibility to look into the future, but I don't know if I agree with the 10 years. It might be 10 months. Things are going to happen real fast. If you learned one thing with this trip we just got back from is people are looking to see what we're doing now. fact, if I were to describe it transformative over the next 10 years, I'd be saying no, over the last 10 months. Think about where we have, I mean, really, 10 months ago, were you looking at giving bikes $110, $15 million plus complete streets? You know, we were nowhere near this. When you look at the finished product and what we're doing, it hasn't just shown up on a piece of paper. It's in the philosophies and the direction that we're giving staff. We're not going out and telling you to build lanes. We're telling you to make this work instead of in billions and a BART train down 680. Here's an alternative. We're looking at legislative changes. We're looking at philosophical changes. We're looking at things that really can work in our lifetime, in short 24-month outlooks. And I think we're there. I think this motion, where we're sending this to the cities, we need to go back, starting with our own, and say this is going to work if you just put your, I guess we don't call it John Henry anymore, but Jill Henry or whatever it is on the paper. Yeah, signature on the paper. We're ready to do something in this county. We're moving on from Caldecott tunnels to, you know, electronic shuttles.
So before we vote, I just wanted to make a very brief comment. One is I've been very impressed with this process. We reached out and, through the help of our staff, contacted thousands of citizens in this county to get their input, and that really was the formative driver for this plan. And we have honored their requests for funding for BART, funding to fix local infrastructure problems, and funding to you know, provide traffic smoothing, complete streets, things like that. At the same time, we've strengthened our growth management policies, maybe not as much as some want, and we built into this plan greater public oversight. The other thing that I've been impressed by is the level of cooperation and participation we've gotten from everybody we've contacted, be it MTC, be it Alameda and San Francisco counties, be it BART, be it our transit operators, be it our EPAC members, et cetera. It has just been great all around. And I was, Randy talked about the sort of shuttle walking that several of us did in Sacramento regarding AB 16 and 65, and how members of the Legislative Council came over in the middle of the day to meet with us in Assemblymember Bonilla's office to try and work out some parts of the language on the bill. So essentially drafting in real time, and it's been, I think, an extraordinary level of cooperation from all involved. And I think, as I look to the staff and consultants, there have really been some very innovative conceptual thinking and adjustments as we listen to the preferences that different groups and people have had of trying to see how we could accommodate as much of that as possible. And I especially want to thank Ross and Bill and Eric and Matt and all the others, Hisham and Randy and all the other staff members who have been involved in pulling this together. And special thanks to my fellow commissioners who were able to act as a countywide body, recognizing the importance of what each region in the county is trying to do, figuring out how to compromise, when to be innovative, and the many times we've tried to transform. And on a personal note, I want to thank you all for selecting me as chair. It has been both educational and fun. And I would ask, Maude, should this be a roll call vote, or can it just be a normal?
This one is normal. The next one is required to be roll call.
All right. Then there's a motion and a second. Would anyone like to have the motion repeated? Seeing none, then all those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? It is unanimous. So congratulations.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
We have 3 more items.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if we can just make the motion on item 1.2 without a staff report, because I'd like to spend more time on some other things, and we all know what this means, other than the roll call. Well,
Yeah, and actually, I do need to.
Say one thing?
Staff recommends approval by roll call of item 1.2 with 2 changes. If you go to page 1.2-4, the intent is this ordinance will become effective April 1st, 2017. The way it's written, that does not do that. If we add April 1st, 2017 after the 2 in the last paragraph, it does that. Mala and I have chatted on that. So I'd ask that you approve it with that change and note that Exhibit A or Exhibit 1 will be the final GMP as approved today.
So moved per Mr. Chuttenden's comments.
Motion by Commissioner Mitchoff, second by Commissioner Pierce. Any discussion, any public comment on item 1.2? Seeing none, we have a roll call vote. Ms. Grover.
Commissioner Abelson? Commissioner Hudson? Commissioner Mitchoff? Commissioner Glover? Commissioner Butt? Commissioner Pierce? Chair Tadson? Commissioner Romick? Commissioner Arnrich? Commissioner Durant? Commissioner Taylor?
That brings us to item 1.3, which is to authorize the release of the proposed transportation expenditure plan for consideration of the countywide imposition of 0.5% sales tax. Mr. Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually didn't have much of a staff report for that. The only thing I would like to say is I already have a schedule worked out with all the jurisdictions beginning on May 31st and Orinda and June 1st and Martinez and 4 or 5 cities each week, so that we would wrap up all the cities by July 5th and go to the Board of Supervisors on July 12th or 19th. The resolution, if we have any comments on the resolution, I'd like to hear those tonight, because we do need each jurisdiction to adopt the resolution. And we will have a slightly different resolution when we go to the county to acknowledge the cities that have approved the TEP, and if we have any that have not. Otherwise, it would be substantially the same. But we will have a slightly modified resolution. So staff recommends approval of the resolution and a direction to seek city and town approval.
Commissioner Pierce.
I would move that we release the proposed TEP to the county, cities, towns, and request approval of the attached resolution in its substantive form that it is now.
The mayor wants to second this one. I got to be in.
All right. So motion by Commissioner Pierce, second by Commissioner Taylor, comment by Commissioner Glover. Oh, okay. Are there any commissioners who have comments? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. 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 It's unanimous. That brings us to item 1.4, discussion on next steps for public education and outreach.
Yeah, this item's essentially going to be a discussion of 2 items, a next round of public opinion polling, and then some ideas on the types of public education we'd want to continue. We'd like to offer some ideas at today's meeting. None of what we're proposing, other than updating the website and a few things, need to get underway before our meeting in June, so we can bring it back if there needs to be a more substantive discussion. So first, I'd like to bring up Eric Zell and Jenny Regas. Jenny's from EMC. They'll discuss a public opinion poll.
Well, thank you very much. Eric Zell representing the consulting team, and Jenny Regas from EMC. Congratulations on your action tonight. Now we have to test with the voters. We have not gone out, I think it's been, a year. We have not gone out to the voters to test the measure you just passed tonight to send to the cities. Or just to really see where the voters are currently at relative to this measure compared to other things they're going to be facing this fall. So with that, EMC has just basically laid out a little bit of a process and a schedule that I'll let Jenny go through, and then we'll answer any questions you have.
Can you go to the next slide, please? Sorry. Oh, perfect. Thanks.
So, thank you. I'm Jenny Regas from EMC. So, basically, what Eric said, we want to go over to do this poll will be an evaluation of what the viability of the measure is as it stands. We want to see if the voters support the Contra Costa Transportation Sales Tax for the November 2016 ballot. Can you go to the next? Oh, sorry. Thank you. So these are the main elements that we're proposing covering in this public opinion poll. We want to measure the perception of the need for transportation funding among the electorate, assess the current level of support for the ballot measure, and gain feedback on the specific ballot measure elements, and understand the potential impact of additional information on the electoral environment. And here's a proposed timeline for this poll. If we get approval to proceed with the poll, we'll start in the next 2 days designing that questionnaire, and then get into the field next week and field through June 5th, and then we can have results to the CCTA staff the week of June 6th with a presentation to the CCTA board on June 15th.
The survey would be, I think, proposed is 800 interviews. It would be done sub-regionally. They basically split the county into basically 5 regions. It would be about a 15-minute poll. So we're not talking about doing some really extensive polling here with extensive messaging. It's really taking the pulse of the voters on an issue that we tested them with a year ago, letting them know what's in this measure, and really taking a snapshot now so that when you come back in the end of June and when the board is considering this in July, we know what the mood of the voters is. So with that, if any questions that the authority may have.
Commissioner Arnerich, Commissioner Mitchoff, Commissioner Hudson.
First of all, nice job. It's always intimidating to sit on that side where we're always staring down at that screen in front and we're not looking to choose. Don't take it personal. There is a screen there. Obviously, when you do polls, and I grew up in a family that's all they did, so I'm concerned always about how you get that sampling. First of all, get somebody to do a 15-minute survey in the world we live today. It's actually a long poll. That how do we get out to those people to get a broad enough view, and what's your sort of methodology to select that group, and how do people opt in and opt out? Because sometimes the opt-in is only those people who are interested in transportation, and then we, or whatever that subject matter is. So how do you build that in there to make sure you're really getting the person who's going to give you an objective view?
We reach a random sample of voters. And to address your concern about people being interested in transportation specifically, they don't know what the poll will be about when they start. So we ask some sort of general questions in the outset. So generally, once people answer a few questions, they're committed to taking the poll. They follow through and respond to the entire survey. But we also make sure that we have a representative sample of the population by making sure that we have the percentages that represent the overall electorate, so it looks demographically similar to the overall population.
And then do you just go to registered voters? Mm-hmm. So that's first criteria.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
It's also, they pull from the voter base based on those who are likely voters in the November 2016 election. So it's intended to replicate the vote as if the vote were taken at the time of the poll.
Commissioner Mitchoff.
Thank you. You all know how to do this, but I just wanted to make sure when you were talking about the elements of the survey, will there be questions in there to pose it against all the other measures that are going to be on the ballot? I don't mean specifically there'll be this proposition, but just, is that in there, that element somewhere?
Yeah, there will be references made to the fact that there may be other measures, transportation measures, or tax measures on the ballot. In talking to Alex Evans even today, Unfortunately, he's back east, but he reminded me that in 2004, when we did Measure J, that there were a number of transportation measures on the ballot, including a BART seismic safety measure, and that they don't really expect that this ballot is going to be substantially different from what it looked like in 2004. So at least from the pollsters' perspective, they're not really too worried about what else may be on the ballot.
And I appreciate that, but 2004, now we're 12 years down the road. A lot of people have had financial
Congestion.
issues since then. And so I just want to make sure there's an element in there
Yes.
that, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, but did you know there's going to be 5 other things on there asking for you?
Yes,
Okay.
and we're not doing ourselves any service if we're just trying to feed to ourselves what we want to know. We need to look at both sides of the equation. We need to hear the best arguments for it, but we also need to hear the arguments against it and understand the impact on the voters, because otherwise, effectively, we need to simulate what the messaging would be in the course of the voters seeing this measure, so that we get a realistic view of what our opportunity is.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hudson?
Yeah, I want to go back to something that Newell pointed out to us, that in the benefits key, there isn't anything about potholes, which is the highest polling or second highest polling. What also isn't in here, it surprised me, Eric, is seniors. There isn't, the disability isn't in there either. And at this point, when you do the survey, I mean, to me, this is the initial step in campaigning. And these are the voters, or the senior, there's.
What are you referencing?
Where?
I can tell you that what will be tested is the actual ballot language that would be recommended to be on the ballot, and it will include all of those words.
It's almost an alternative to what you're asking. So you're talking about the survey, but to me, in your questions, is going to be about, and you'll have it but it isn't on the benefits key. So I'm kind of sliding this in, that this is something we don't miss when we start getting into the campaigning, because we old ones vote.
No,
Let me
absolutely.
clarify, that benefits page was in the BART and transit category. It wasn't, and I agree that we need, potholes fixed to run transit, but it's, yeah.
I think
that language needs to go in along with one of those bullets.
I think you're referencing this other document, but this document is not, there are benefits under each category, but this is not the basis by which the poll will be designed.
Okay.
Frankly, we need to ask the same question we asked a year ago, or we're not going to understand what the change has been, if there is a change. And we included all of that language: potholes, traffic smoothing, BART, all the things that we knew were important to the voters already, we included. And we certainly will be able to include it now because it's in the measure.
Commissioner Peoples.
Supervisor Mitchoff asked my question. With MTC considering a gas tax, BART and AC are going out, but you guys will look at all that.
So I had a question. In your 800, which are going to be likely 2016 voters, if you find that older people are unusually willing to answer the phone and participate in the question, do you wind up weighting components of the respondents?
So if the demographic is that X percentage of the voters are of a particular age, they will keep calling likely voters until that percentage of the population answers the questionnaire.
So you've got subquotas for different categories.
Exactly. So if 52% of the voters are women, then they will keep calling voters until 52% of the sample are women. And that will be the case across demographics.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments? I think perhaps Commissioner Glover would like to make a motion? Would you like to make a motion? All right. There's a motion by Commissioner Glover, second by Commissioner Mitchell. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. So before we go to our non-existent correspondence and adjourn, we do have a subcommittee. It includes Commissioner Butt, Commissioner Romick, Commissioner Durant, and me, that's going to look over the final language, including the language on the attachment that would become the public document, and we can report at the June meeting. Okay.
Chair, if you don't mind interruption, another thing that you heard out of the last discussion from Eric was that they're going to want a poll on the actual ballot language. So that's something with that schedule that has to happen before our next June meeting. So that might be another task for your subcommittee to work with the consultant team on the drafting the best language. And of course, we'll formally approve that in July.
All right. And next item is just a schedule of future meetings, and I'm happy to note that there are no special authority meetings for the expenditure plan scheduled. So thanks to everyone's work. So we are adjourned.